Já jsem Eda Janečka, já jsem byl narozený na Dubina a já jsem jak praví souse, tady na Fayette County. Já jsem býval tam celý roky, jak praví. Býval tam hlad na Dubina, jméno bylo Tom Lee, on byl Černý, on tam býval a já jsem bude mluvit trošku o co Tom Lee tam dělal na Dubina a jakový hlad on byl. On byl starý hlad, co dělal všelijaké kramy a on je už pryč, ale ještě tam jsou lidi, co pamatují, co on dělal. I wrote an article here about Tom Lee. Here it is. If you would, please make a copy of that for me, please. Okay. Thank you so much. What we do is every single week we have an article in the newspaper concerning Fayette County history, and I wrote this on Tom Lee. And so, at any rate, Tom Lee's a fascinating guy from the standpoint that I always had a love for history, and especially Fayette County and Dubina history in particular. And a lot of that stuff, I've done a great deal of research. It's hard to find a lot of information about slaves sometimes because, they were slaves. And apparently this man was owned by the Hendersons, and to the best of my putting pieces together, and a lot of this is oral history, is that at an early age he fought at the Texas Revolution, and there were some Hendersons there in the Texas Revolution at San Jacinto. His job was to reload muskets, and then somewhere along the line he was sold to someone by the name of Lee, and again was somehow involved in the Civil War. We know he was in the Civil War, and then became a free man and ended up in Dubina and owned quite a bit of land there, and learned the blacksmith trade from a fellow by the name of Joseph Petter, Joseph Petter was an entrepreneur there. He owned the saloon, and he owned the cotton gin and the grits mill and just a lot of different stuff. He also had a blacksmith shop there, and he was also a state representative at one time. But he was an interesting fellow from the standpoint that he was already getting older, but he owned a lot of land. He built, one of the things that's kind of interesting, we have a Catholic church in Dubina, and it's on something called the Painted Churches Tour. It's has a lot of interesting artwork and things of that nature. The steeple that is on top of the church was made by Tom Lee, and that was done in 1887. And so this is the second church. The first time when it was knocked down by a hurricane, but anyway, they put the steeple back up there. Also, there's a school there called Lee School, which was named after Tom, and it was an African-American school. In Dubina, which was a Czech community, we had three schools, a public school, Catholic school, and a black school. The amazing thing is, and I have the death certificate, he was 117 years old when he died, if you can believe that. I mean, it's an actual death certificate, and it talks about, he just died. And then doing more research, I was out walking around, this is years ago, and I was talking to an old guy, and I said, "What is that thing there?" And he said, "I don't know." He said, we're looking at some type of plant, and he said, "Well, that comes from Tom Lee." He said he used to make tea out of that every single day, and it's a mullein plant is what it is. And I took some of the seed and I planted it. Of course, now I have it going up wild all over the place. But fascinating guy. He spoke Czech. The fact that he could speak Czech obviously added a lot to, because the people that lived there, I'd say, in those days, probably 70% of them didn't speak English, or 50% at least didn't. The older people, none of them spoke English. So yeah, if you had to communicate, and it wasn't only Tom, there were other black people that lived around the area that if you grew up in that area and you grew up with Czechs, you learned to speak the Czech language. I mean, you picked cotton with the blacks, and you know, you did everything with black people and that were back and forth. And if you wanted to get along, if you wanted a job, if you wanted to do anything, you have to learn the language. Again, most of the people that were there, the older people, they didn't speak English, so it was a way of, yeah, you had to do it to communicate. There was a fella that I knew very well. His name was Buck. And he was a little person, let's put it that way. He was, I guess, a midget. And he worked for Brazier Motor Company and in Weimar. And everybody knew Buck. As a matter of fact, he died here, times fly, but maybe 25 years ago, who knows. He used to love to fish, and I mean, I'd see Buck all the time. Yeah, and he spoke Czech, I'd see him on the street or whatever, and we converse in Czech. That's not uncommon at all for African-American people to be speaking Czech in the communities.